Welkom terug. Die kieswet moet gewysig word. Hier 'n bietjie agtergrond. 2024 se algemene verkiesing gaan anders wees as al die vorige algemene verkiesings in Suid-Afrika se demokratiese tydperk. Die rede hiervoor is dat die konstitusionele hof reeds in Junie 2020 bevind het dat die huidige kieswet gewysig moet word, sodat onafhanklike kandidate op provinsiale en nasionale vlak ingesluit kan word. Op die oomblik kan onafhanklike kandidate byvoorbeeld nie in die nasionale vergadering dien nie. Net LPs mag wat aan partye behoort. Onafhanklike kandidate kan wel tans op munisipale vlak aan verkiesings deelneem. Die regering het egter met die verandering van die kieswet gesloer. Eers in Januarie vanjaar is 'n konsepwysigingswet voorgelê. Daar is groot ongelukkigheid oor die voorgestelde wysigings. Kritici sê dit is onregverdig, omdat dit op verskeie maniere politieke partye ten koste van onafhanklike kandidate bevoordeel. Die spertyd wat die konstitusionele hof vir die parlement gegee het om die wet te wysig, is alreeds met 6 maande aangeskuif. Die hoogste hof in die land het gesê die wet moet nou teen Desember gewysig wees. Ontleeders is skepties oor of die parlementêre proses teen dan gaan klaar wees, aangesien die wetgewing uiters ingewikkeld is en baie verskillende rolspelers tevrede gaan moet hou. Om verder oor die kieswet en onafhanklike kandidate te gesels, sluit Mmusi Maimane by ons aan. Hy is die hoof-aktivis van die One South Africa-beweging wat hulle beywer vir die deelname van onafhanklike kandidate in ons politiek. Mmusi, welcome. So the 2020 Concord judgment was historic. Our electoral system should be amended. Why did we only see a proposed bill in January?
Well, first of all, good evening and thank you for having me. I think that we must realize that in the last 2 years, I think we've had a parliament that hasn't worked. In fact, in truth, when you think about many issues in our country, our parliament has been completely dysfunctional when you think about the Zondo Commission and so many others. And so when I saw that in the last 6 months they started to railroad this bill through, it makes you realize the fact that we have a parliament that doesn't really want accountability. And furthermore, we have elected representatives who are not scared of the people. And so it is with great pain that they had to eventually go back to the Concord, apply for an extension, only to pass a watered-down bill, which I don't think will necessarily even going to pass constitutional muster.
So why is your organisation, the One South Africa movement, unhappy about this bill as it stands?
Well, I think if you look at what is contained in the bill, firstly, it doesn't give the full power to independents to be able to stand and represent communities. The second thing, which I think is the hardest, is that it doesn't recognize constituencies. And what defines a constituency is the fact that if you live in a community and you are worried about your hospital, your school, the things that national government are responsible for, no one is able to respond to that. Instead, they've reduced a constituency to a province. Thirdly, I think that not only does it eliminate that, it still favors the big political parties in that the proportional representative component of the votes eventually gets split with the political parties, which means in essence, it keeps status quo, minimizes accountability, and really doesn't help communities get power back.
Do you think there's enough time between now and the 2024 election for Parliament to finalise this process?
I think Parliament needs to show courage. It needs to be strong. And in fact, it's my invitation to President Ramaphosa to say, there was already a bill that was on the table that actually gave you constituencies, that allowed you the space to actually reform the Electoral Act. Put that to public consultation, use the 6 months to pass a bill that actually works, take the Ministerial Advisory Committee's recommendations and split the country into constituencies so that ultimately people will know who they vote for and they can vote for them. That's all we're asking for, because even Judge Zondo himself recognizes in the Zondo Commission that when it's said and done, people must know who they vote for, and I would hope one day in my lifetime we could directly vote for the president so that the president does not fear the party but instead fears the people.
What can an independent candidate provide a voter that a party political member can't?
Well, in our laws, we've made it possible that in the way Parliament works, members of Parliament must spend time in constituencies, which means that actually someone who's independent and from that community can actually respond to that community. They are not beholden to the party. And that's a very important thing, because I can recall being in Parliament when we were debating whether, you'll remember all this too well, whether a swimming pool is a fire pool, people in a party get told, you will vote to say it's a fire pool or it's a whatever. But instead, they don't look after what citizens all know. So someone who's independent is able to not only respond to the needs of the community directly, give them direct access, use what Parliament uses as constituency period, which is allocated, for them to go and actually serve their community members. And then lastly, when they're in Parliament, know they are scared of the people. We must all be envious of what's taking place in the UK when you think about Boris Johnson, because in truth, those were members of Parliament who said, cannot go back to our constituencies to answer questions about your mismanagement, so we will resign. Imagine if in South Africa, those who watched Zondo state capture occur were able to go, we can't sit and tell the people back home that money has been stolen through PPEs, that services are not delivered, that jobs are not being created, and defend the government. We are going to resign and still keep our seats because we protect the people ahead of the party. That's the big advantage for the people.
Mmusi, you know that a campaign costs money. Where would an independent candidate get those kind of resources if they didn't have the backing of a big political party and movement behind them?
Well, that's the beauty of the system, right? Like if you think about campaigning in a small community, let's just say you were in the city of Johannesburg. The costs are less. The people of Johannesburg must fund that candidate, and it's accountable. But at this point in time, big political parties spend over closer to R1 billion to give us candidates that none of us know. Whereas an independent would spend less, campaign in a smaller area, and be able to go, this is the people's money, I'll have to come back to them and account back to them. So I would urge that it needs to come from there. And then ultimately, when we look at the new party funding regulation, I would urge that it must be rewritten in such a way that someone who puts their hand up and says, I want to represent the people, must be able to get some funding, so that politics must never be reduced only to the wealthy, but rather be also available and democratized so that every citizen can have the opportunity to participate if that citizen qualifies by getting enough votes, enough signatures, and enough of a community to support them in the campaign.
Would you consider putting your hand up as an independent candidate in the 2024 elections?
Well, what I'll be doing in 2024 is bringing a number of independent candidates, working together in communities, and I'll be standing to lead that team of South Africans to say it would be better for us to give voice back to the people and be able to bring change to South Africa. So that's the work I'm engaged with, and that's why I'm going all across communities saying, let's give the best, and I will be part of that system to bring change, because ultimately I believe in accountability, and I believe that me, Mmusi Maimane, the best way I can serve the people is not to serve a party, but is to serve the people of this country.
We'll watch that space. Mmusi, thank you so much.
Much appreciated.